See, that's the problem, man. They have this idea that they were added because 5v5 doesn't work without them, but I want to try playing 5v5 without the passives and the super juiced up tanks in these new modes. Yes, the news is true. We're talking about 6v6 again, and in fact, we will be playing it very, very shortly. So today there was a director's take talking about many playtests coming to the game. So there are 4 of them, 2 of which I think are arriving this season in season 13 about 5v5, and then the other 2 about 6v6 arriving next season, kind of spread out from each other. So what you're seeing here is that we are getting a 6v6 test that is going to be not role locked necessarily. You have to have a minimum of 1 per each role on your team, but only a maximum of 3. So basically, at all times, you're either going to have 2-2-2 or 3-2-1, regardless of what any of those roles are in that 3-2-1 format. So that is one of them. That is going to be arriving in Season 14. There is going to be another traditional 2-2-2 test, but they say that it's going to be with less CC and hero reworks. I don't quite know what they mean by this. I don't know if this is just saying like, oh, it's the changes that we made to 5v5, the hero reworks we've made from 5v5 in 6v6, or are they trying to suggest that there are other reworks and CCC removal that they are working on that are going to be coming in this test specifically? I am not sure. If you ask me, I think CC is a little sensationalized, and the amount that we have right now is perfectly fine. I think it'd be weird to remove even more of it, but we'll have to see. I'm interested to see what they're thinking about that. And then, of course, that's also Season 14. Season 13 will have a quick play hacked, where it will just be 5v5, but you'll have a 2 heroes per role limit. So you could have 2 tanks, but maybe you only have 1 DPS, or you have 2 tanks, 2 DPS, and maybe 1 support. And with that, also tank health is gonna get reduced. I don't think they're doing anything else. It's just gonna be tank health. And then the final one, also coming in Season 13, is a special 5v5 game mode. Same thing. It's gonna work the exact same way, except for whatever role has less in it. Tank, if you have 1 tank, or 1 DPS or 1 support, that 1 character is going to get a bonus. I bet tanks will just be like bonus health. I wonder if DPS will be higher damage, and I wonder if supports will be higher healing numbers. I don't know. They're being a little coy about what those actually are going to be. We'll have to find out very soon, because this is coming this season. So I'm going to swap to the director's take. I'm not going to read this. I think you can read it yourself. Other people will read it to you. I don't really want that video to be what this is. So I'm going to kind of bring up a couple of concerns that I have and hopes that I have for these tests. I say concerns are more about like, I hope there's things that they keep in mind, or just kind of like, what are we to expect from these things? I think my biggest thing that I want to talk about is that they are going to be looking at the balance for 6v6 differently than 5v5. So the 6v6 game modes are going to have different balance patches. So they're going to be looking at tank survivability and power, which will be lower in 6v6. I think that's pretty obvious. They're also going to be looking at the role passives that they've added as well. The one thing I want to point out here is that if you are going to test these game modes side by side with each other, I think the min 1 max 3 versus just the open max 2 style of 5v5, those need to be as close of controls as possible. They need to be close to each other. So I don't know if I exactly agree with running 2 tests right next to each other where one has completely different balance than the other one, but we're actually trying to figure out 5v5 versus 6v6, because I would love to play 5v5 in this new mode without passives, without these tank power and survivability buffs. I think there is a world where 5v5 can exist without these things, and I'm afraid that when 6v6 comes out and it feels better, maybe because it's 6v6, but also it might just feel better because those things have been removed. I'm afraid people are going to then just go, well, 6v6 is better. And it's like, well, there's a couple confounding variables. Now, the argument obviously is that, well, in 5v5, they needed these things because of the one less character. But I honestly don't think that is necessarily true. The dev team put them in there, but does that necessarily mean that they need to be there? I feel like it could be its own experiment in itself if you didn't have these things and you walked back a couple of these balance changes, right? That's a little bit of just like a off. I just wanted to like put that in there because I do think that if the tests are too different from each other, then it's not actually going to do well in at least comparing the two. I don't know if they are necessarily super worried about comparing 6v6 or 5v5. They want to feel how the change, or they want to see how the changes feel in a vacuum. Like, how does 6v6 just feel in general, not compared to what it feels like now live. Also the same thing with the other 5v5 changes. But I do think that is something that to keep in mind in terms of the community perspective about how these things work, because I think people are going to go in the mindset of 5v5 versus 6v6 when the developers are just going into, does 6v6 work in the first place? Do these changes to 5v5 work in the first place? There might be a little bit of tension there, and I'm not exactly sure if that is a good thing. Let's talk about both the 5v5 modes, because the 6v6 modes, there's not much I really want to see because they've already said that they're going to be doing a couple other things. So it's going to be a little tough to say like definitively, I want this versus I want this. But in 5v5 for both of the game modes, I would like different balance as well. I know they're just trying to go with everything that they have now to keep it as simple as possible, just to see format-wise regular 5v5 versus these new 5v5 game modes. But I would love to see different balance, because I think that if they don't touch tank survivability, if you've played any open queue at all, you know that tanks are king, and with the tank passives, they get a lot more comparatively, even like with the health nerfs, their survivability with the tank passives is actually much higher than it probably should be proportionately to the actual game. So tanks are still extremely, extremely good in that format. So I think there need to be even more tank nerfs if they are planning to have up to 2 tanks on the battlefield at one time. Just having health nerfs is not going to cut it, in my opinion, right? And that would bring back some of those problems that you had with pre-roll queue, where it's like, well, we didn't get a tank on our team, or well, we only have 1 tank on our team, and we're going to feel like that, right? There's going to be optimal strategies that people are just not going to play because there aren't that many tank players. So it's a bit of a concern, in my opinion. The other thing is that for the Kingmaker, they say that they're going to have characters that have a bonus. Now, I don't want those characters' bonuses to feel like they are playing a super juiced up version of their character and they could basically be like server admin. So I think a good middle ground is maybe bring character power across the board down just a little and then bring that Kingmaker power up a little bit higher than what it is on live. So like there is still like a gap between them, but the overall power level is still shrunk and their relative offset of power is not that high, so that they have a bigger impact, sure, but they're not going to be running lobbies just because they are a better character than everybody else on the field. That doesn't seem like a great idea to me. And to be honest, I don't think this Kingmaker one is going to stick around, but I think that is something that we should talk about. Now, what is really interesting, I think, here is that they have said that there is a world where 5v5 and 6v6 exist together, and you know what? I think that is very, very fine, right? The game, you get to play the game how you want to, right? I think the question then becomes, which one will be the mode? To be honest with you, I think they'll keep it as 5v5 being like quick play regular, but 6v6 will still be there and you'll get to choose between them. And if 6v6 becomes much more popular, like queue times suffer, then sure, 6v6 will be there. Now, I think that if there is a problem with queue times, to me, they're testing out modes where you queue for one, you just queue in one queue, right? You don't have roll queue, but you still have like limits to the roles you play. If both of those get implemented for 5v5 and 6v6, let's say for theory, the min max for 6v6 and then the max 2 for 5v5, Q times across the board will be much better, so that if you split your Q base, then Q times don't really take a hit, right? So if 5v5 and 6v6 exist together in open queue format, then you could have your cake and eat it too. And I really think that is what they're trying to push here, right? If these tests go successfully, then they can have both game modes. And if you don't like 5v5, you can play 6v6. And if you don't like 6v6, you can play 5v5. And if you like both, there you go. Congrats. That's awesome. Now you get 2 game modes that you have to juggle. And then, of course, the then question becomes, what is the main game mode? What is OWCS going to play? Like, what is going to be the competitive mode? That is going to be a different question. I know, obviously, you're thinking, well, it's going to be 6v6 because that's what people are going to prefer no matter what. And to be honest with you, that's probably right. I think you're probably right with that one. And is that a problem? No, I think 6v6 is its biggest strengths was that it had super big highs that you could see at professional play and higher level play. It was just like super low and inconsistent across the board, right? So I think there's a world where 6v6 being the competitive standard and then 5v5 being the ladder/casual standard is totally fine. Or a world where 6v6 just becomes the standard because that's what people want. Anyways, so with that out of the way, I do also want to talk about a couple of things that I want to see. So either way, in 6v6, 5v5, I don't care. I want them both to still have the player agency that we desire, right? I want every role to feel powerful. I want you to be able to feel your impact when you're doing something well on every role. I think my biggest problem with some of the tanks in Overwatch 1 in 6v6 is that doing the right thing didn't feel good. It didn't give you great impact when you were doing the right thing, but doing the wrong thing stuck out like a sore thumb. And it was really detrimental. So it was really frustrating playing tank because you could be playing well, but it just doesn't feel like you're doing anything or feel like you're playing well. And then the second you play poorly, now it's just all on you. The weight of the world collapses. It is such a hot and cold, not even hot and cold. It's like a mild and cold type gameplay loop that the highs of playing tank just weren't there most of the time, especially I think for some like those off tank characters. Diva comes to mind a lot. I think her defense matrix was super, it was such an important tool in 6v6, but it wasn't a tool that felt good and it didn't give you that proper feedback. You know, the micro missiles and killing things is, but Diva was less so doing that and more so bullying and protecting. So that's kind of like, I need there to be the impact that you felt in Overwatch 2, specifically at the beginning of Overwatch 2. That is what I'm chasing. I don't care if it's 6v6. I don't care if it's 5v5. I want that. I don't like what we currently have now. I think it's an okay state, but you know, tanks are too powerful and DPS are not powerful enough. And supports aren't even making as many plays as they used to, probably because the tanks are keeping them in check. So I don't like the current balance right now, but there was a world, in my opinion, where Overwatch 2 5v5 was approaching what I wanted it to be. So anyways, another thing we have to take a look at is support sustain. I think a nice marrying of the two ideas when I was just talking about in this one is that if you lower sustain across the board and you lean more into utility and damage for the supports, then you can have higher DPS. You can get through the 2 tanks easier while having less sustain, right? So it's obviously a balancing act, but I think there's a healthy middle ground where things aren't just dying instantly because there's too much damage and not enough sustain. But we don't want it to be that people are never dying because you have bat brig backlines that can just completely negate everything, right? So I think if you lean more into damage with the supports like they did in Overwatch 2, especially with our Kirikos or Yaris, even our Junos to some extent, right? So I think that could be a nice way, a nice middle ground to try to get those sustained supports out of there while keeping that individual impact. Also, you need to be able to find a way to justify playing DPS more if the format is not going to be so rigid, right? There will always be one DPS on the field, but you don't want it to feel like someone got the short end of the stick and so they're playing the bad hero. Now, I think there are going to be a couple of characters that could fit in without having to be super like, you know, I think like Venture, right? Venture is kind of like a pseudo tank, in my opinion, the way that they play. So there's a way that Venture or like DPS are still going to feel powerful. You're going to feel their impact. But I think it is important that DPS feel powerful and they feel good to play regardless, right? The hardest thing with DPS is that some of their kits are so simple that they either break or just completely worthless depending on the balance, right? There is no good like middle ground. So I think maybe there need to be a couple of DPS reworks that make them a little more versatile, more engaging, more powerful, honestly, because otherwise you don't want to just get stuck playing the weakest role in the game. And since DPS is so popular, I don't want to get stuck with 3 DPS on my team because people don't want to switch because they want to play DPS and now we're losing again, right? That's the problem with the open queue format. So you need to make it worthwhile to play any combination of the things that you allow, in my opinion. And that is the absolute hardest thing to do. So I'm interested to see where they're going. And honestly, maybe the solution again is just have 5v5 and 6v6 up so that both of them have their problems, but they're different. So the ones that you don't care about, the one that you like better, then you can avoid those problems and then go play the one that you like. That could be the solution. It's like we can't solve all the problems, but we can have all the solutions spread out across a couple game modes. I don't know. I think it is really interesting. I am ready to see what Blizzard have cooked up, especially for the 6v6 tests, because those seem a little more involved with the changes that they've made. So yeah, that is it. Anyways, please subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that. Leave me a comment. What do you think about these changes? Which ones are you looking forward to? And what do you want to see, regardless of format, come to Overwatch or change about Overwatch? Let me know and like the video while you're at it. This was streamed live, twitch.tv/Lane Hemingway. That's Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays is when I stream. And if you would like to get 3 months subbed to my channel, you can possibly do that if you enter my Discord and go and enter the Game Awards prediction. If you are able to be the most accurate with your predictions for Game of the Year nominees, all the info is down in there. You can get that to my Twitch channel. Ad-free viewing. Yay! Okay, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please check that out if you would like, and have a good day.